Charlotte Ann, let me get it pulled up, okay? Okay, Charlotte Ann, so when you're looking at number 19 on the chapter review, it says sketch the rectangular flag of Puerto Rico as shown at the right, and then find the measure of angle 1 if the measure of angle 3 is 55 degrees, and then justify each step in the argument, okay? So if we look at this picture of the flag here, and it tells us that angle 3 is 55 degrees, right? Then it tells us over here that this is a rectangle. And we know that rectangles have all 90-degree angles, right? So we know then that 2 and 3 are complementary. So that means they equal 90 degrees. Okay, so then to find out angle 2, we would say 90 minus 55. And then we know that angle 1 and angle 2 would be congruent because it's two parallel lines here that are cut by this transversal here. Okay, so, or two parallel lines here, sorry, that are cut by this transversal. So those are corresponding angles. Does that help you? Okay, good. Hey, Madison, did you have a question? Okay, number 25 on the chapter review. Let me pull it up. Okay, Madison, can you see the question on the screen? Okay. So if we look at this problem, we're supposed to write the equation of the line that passes through the point P and is parallel and perpendicular with the line that's given, okay? So we're going to have to write two equations, and you can see the answers are already on here. But here's how we would do it. If you use that formula that we've talked about, y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. For a parallel line, we need the slope to be the same as this line. So we would plug in, see, I wonder if I can, let me see if I can do this. No, that does not work how I wanted it to. Nothing. Okay, so anyway, for a parallel line, we need the slope to be the same. So we would plug into that formula. We would say y minus a minus 1, so that's going to be y plus 1, equals m, which is our slope, which is 6, times x minus x1, which is 3, so minus 3, okay? And then when you distribute that in, you're going to have 6x minus 18, and then you have to bring that 1 over, so you're going to end up with y equals 6x minus 19. Okay, so that's for the parallel line. Now, for a perpendicular line, you need a slope that's the opposite reciprocal. So if my slope is 6 over 1, the opposite reciprocal is going to be negative 1 over 6. So I'm going to do the same thing again. Y minus a minus 1, so y plus 1, equals negative 1/6 times x minus 3. Okay, now I'm going to multiply that in, so that's going to be negative 1/6 x, and negative 1/6 times negative 3, your 6 and your 3 will go to 1 and 2, so it will be a positive 1/2. Okay, equals y plus 1. Now we need to move that 1 over by subtracting 1. So we're going to have y equals negative 1/6 x, and then positive 1/2 minus 1 equals negative 1/2. Okay. Does that make sense, Madison? Okay, good. Number 26, Charlotte Ann. That's going to be worked out the same way that I just did 25. So when you're looking at it, let me erase all this. For a parallel line, you're going to have the same slope, okay? So the slope for the parallel part is going to be, well, okay, so this equation is a little bit different. It's given to you in the form 7y plus 4x equals 2. So work that equation around to where you get it equal to y. So we need the y on one side and everything else on the other. So we're going to start by subtracting 4x, okay? So we'll have 7y equals negative 4x plus 2. And then we need to bring that 7 over also, so we'll have to divide by 7. So we'll have y equals negative 4/7 x plus 2 over 7, okay? So now our slope is negative 4/7. So for a parallel line, our slope is going to be negative 4/7. And for a perpendicular line, we're going to flip it and make it the opposite sign. So it's going to be 7/4. And then you'll plug those into this formula over here. The y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Yeah, that's the tricky part of that one, is getting the y by itself, Charlotte Ann. Madison, for tomorrow, the chapter test that's at the end of the chapter is a super good review for the test, okay? So I would go through that and make sure that you understand how to work all of those problems. And Charlotte Ann, I put the answer key, or actually the solutions key, so it has everything, shows all of the steps to work out the problems for the chapter review. I put that on Google Classroom just a couple of minutes ago, but I'm not going to do that for the chapter test. Natalie, do you understand how you got them wrong on the review? Okay, you want to tell me which ones and we can go through those? Okay, so let me pull up 27. Okay, Natalie, so for number 27, let me take a screenshot of it. Okay, for 27, we're supposed to look at these two lines that are parallel and find the distance between them, okay? And then round to the nearest tenth. So for this problem, we need to make a line between these two parallel lines that measures how far apart they are. So what we need to do is we need to find a line that's perpendicular to the two, because that will be a straight line between them, okay? Rather than just saying, oh, let's measure that line. That's not going to be a straight line between the two of them, so it's not going to measure the true distance between the two. Neither is going like this, because that's not a straight line either. So what we'll need to do is figure out, let's first, okay, here's a tip. Start out with the points that they give you and look at the line that would go between -1, 3 and 2, 2. And let's calculate the slope of that, okay? So for the slope, it's going to be y2 minus y1. So 2 minus 3 over x2 minus x1. So 2 minus a minus 1, which is 2 plus 1. Okay, so you're going to have negative 1/3 for your slope. And now for your lines, you know that they're parallel, so they should have the same slope. So on this one, our slope would be up 3 and over 1. So if our slope is 3 for the parallel lines, and then negative 1/3 for the line that we drew between the two of them, that says those are perpendicular. Okay, so that we know this line here is a straight line between those two parallel lines. So now we just need to figure out the distance of that line. So we need the distance formula. So what's the distance formula? Okay, yeah, you're right. It's D equals the square root of, except it's x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. Doesn't totally make a difference for the x2 and the x1. So if that's our distance formula, let's plug in using those points, okay? So distance equals the square root of x2 minus x1 is going to be 2 minus a minus 1, or 2 plus 1 squared. And then y2 minus y1 is going to be 2 minus 3 squared, okay? So 2 plus 1 is 3 squared, and 2 minus 3 is a negative 1 squared, okay? 3 squared is 9. Negative 1 squared is 1. So that equals the square root of 10. And now it tells us to round to the nearest tenth. So if we take the square root of 10 in our calculator, we come up with 3.162277766. So if we round that to the 10th, it's going to be 3.2. So the distance between those two parallel lines is 3.2 units. Okay, so that makes sense. You're good with that? Okay, so let's see, what is 29? Is there a 29? I don't see a 29. Did you mean 27 and 28? Oh, okay. You're welcome. Were there any other ones or just those? Okay, good. Now tomorrow, guys, I'm going to have a bonus for you to work, and it's worth a total of 4 points, okay? So it's a problem that will have 4 sections that you have to answer. So if you get each part totally right, you'll get 1 point for each part that you get completely right. I'm not going to give partial credit on a bonus, though. So if you're missing something on it, you don't get the extra bonus point for that part, okay? Okay, Charlotte Ann, for number 24, you're supposed to tell whether the given points or whether the line that goes through the given points are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So what do we have to know to tell if a line is parallel or perpendicular? Yeah, the slope, that's right. So on this problem, we're going to have to calculate the slope between those lines and compare it. So in order to do that, slope is y2 minus y1, okay? So y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So if we say y2 minus y1 for the first line is going to be 4 minus a minus 4. So that becomes a big plus 4, right? Over negative 1 minus 3, which is 8 over negative 1 minus 3 is negative 4. So that reduces to negative 2, okay? So the slope for line 1 is negative 2. So now we go down here and work on line 2. y2 minus y1 is 1 minus 7 over x2 minus x1 is 5 minus 2, okay? So 1 minus 7 is negative 6, and then 5 minus 2 is 3, and that reduces to negative 2. So we have negative 2 for one and negative 2 for the other, so those are parallel lines. Okay. Yeah, you have to watch your signs on that and watch how you add or subtract I sure can, Madison. Give me just a second. Okay, Madison. Number 11, we're supposed to find the value of x that makes line M parallel to N. So we know that for two lines to be parallel, their corresponding angles are congruent, and these are corresponding angles here, the two angles that are noted. So we have to set them equal to each other to make M parallel to N. So we would say x equals 128 minus x, and then we have to solve for x. So since we have a minus x on this side, we're going to add x to both sides to get x by itself, okay? So x plus x is 2x equals 128. And now we need to divide by 2 on both sides. So 128 divided by 2 is going to give us 64. So if x equals 64, then both of those lines would be parallel. You're welcome. Hey, Ethan, did you have any questions? Okay. On the chapter test, Madison? So the difference between the two is that 16 wants you to find an equation for a line that's parallel, and 19 wants you to find an equation for a line that's perpendicular. So for parallel lines, what do we have to have the slope be? For parallel lines, you want the slopes of the two lines to be equal to each other, right? Okay. And then for perpendicular lines, you want the slopes to be opposite reciprocals. So that's where you're going to take the line that they give you on 16 and see what the slope is. And then for it to make a parallel line, you need to have that same slope. Then for 19, you see what the slope is on the line that they give you. And then to find the perpendicular slope, you're going to flip it and change the sign. And then you'll plug into that formula, that point slope form, the one that's y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Does that help you? Okay, good.